Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and welcome to a very special Taliesin Talks, which is a very unexpected Taliesin Talks, because yesterday, as the world was waiting in front of their launchers, quivering in anticipation for the WoW Classic Beta to go live, counting down to 4 PM UK time, when we were certain something big was going to happen, Blizzard pulled one of the cheekiest switcheroos you will ever see and delivered not the beta, which came much later, like seriously many hours later, but a new installment of the BFA super high fidelity CGI cinematic Saurfang saga, which before now has given us the BFA trailer, Old Soldier and Lost Honor, these amazing, beautiful, nuanced films that have a habit of cropping up just when you least expect them, and that was definitely the case here. And look, here's the thing, I was one of those people sitting on stream waiting for the beta to drop at 4 PM, and when we got Safe Haven, which is the name of the new cinematic, instead, well, I honestly didn't mind one little bit, and I'm not ashamed to admit that suddenly I cared just a little bit less about Classic and a whole lot more about BFA and the upcoming 8.2, because A, yes, I really am that easy, and B, this new film is absolutely exquisite and more than deserving of our now traditional deep dive analysis. So heads up, before we get started, this is not a reaction video, okay? I've already watched Safe Haven more times than is healthy for any human being, and if you want to see my initial live reaction, it was on stream and it looked like this. Oh no! Holy shit! But that's not what this video is for, and if you haven't seen Safe Haven already, then honestly, this will be a really terrible way to watch it, okay? Because we are going to be stopping and starting, talking over bits and all sorts, as we discuss all the callbacks, foreshadowing, references, and meanings crammed into this 4 minutes, and then discuss what it means now and for the future of the story going forward. As Sylvanas, who, don't forget, is definitely not Garrosh 2.0, okay? Because seriously, why would you even think that? What is even your problem, okay? Goes ahead and forges even more parallels between herself and, Garrosh. And the return of an old friend as well. So join us as we take a deep dive cinematic analysis into Safe Haven, okay? Go, 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 go. And yes, I'm stopping already after the Blizzard logo at the beginning, because I told you that we'd be stopping a lot, but this is important, okay? Because one of the absolute best things about these Saurfang cinematics has been the sound design and the music, which honestly has been nothing short of stunning in every installment. But there's a neat little detail that I want to point out here in the soundtrack, because by now we've established what is Saurfang's theme, his musical motif, which we should have come to recognize. So even before we are given any visuals at all in this new cinematic, the music announces to us what we are about to see. Another chapter in this particular storyline starring our favourite old jaded grizzled orc. But what's really cute is that those two notes that we instantly now recognise from Old Soldier and Lost Honor, they just so happen to also be the first two notes, or the same progression at least, of Nagrand General Day Part 2. Which the cinematic soundtrack then seamlessly turns into, because that is our setting for this scene, the original homeland of the orcs, current day destroyed Draenor, Outland, Nagrand. Although again, the musical motifs tell us that before any of the visuals do, because our first image is of this golden wheat growing in the blazing, healthy looking sunlight, and the gnarled, calloused, dirty hands of an orc that has seen more summers than he can probably even remember, arriving in stark contrast to the idyllic scene, you know, basically ruining it with his big ugly paws. The gentlest touch of the growing wheat disintegrates it and it falls apart into the wind. This is not the strong, nourishing crop that it first seemed, and as we get our first glimpse of Saurfang, as usual from below, which gives him this constant sense of size and heft, but also I always think helps lend him an air of sadness, like he's looking down, disappointed on the things that are happening. He isn't surprised that the crops are so hollow and weak. In fact, there's a kind of a grim remembrance here of the land that he left behind long ago, which you can see kind of steals his resolve to get on with what happens next. Because as he trudges solemnly but purposely forward, we have this beautiful, sweeping reveal of Outland Nagrand, a familiar view with familiar music for us and for Varrock, which we'll get to in just a moment, but, you know, come on, internet, you know me by now. You know when this view appears in a cinematic set in a real-life in-game zone, you know what the first thing I'm going to do is, don't you? The first thing I'm going to do, obviously, is to go and try and find this exact spot in-game to see if it actually exists. And I'm very happy to report that, yes, it only bloody does, you know. Obviously a little bit smaller in scale, but it's there, minus the little farm and minus the wheat. Maybe the wheat was planted since by the new inhabitants. Who knows? But you know I love shit like this, so this made me very happy. And obviously as Saurfang makes his way through the wheat fields to the homestead, there's one particular reference that springs instantly to mind. Gladiator, the movie Gladiator. The scenes of Russell Crowe running his hand over the golden crops as he makes his way back to his own family home after fighting in faraway lands is so famous that it's impossible not to think of it here. And even though this cinematic purposely evokes that scene, it also subverts it in quite an interesting way. Russell Crowe is returning back to the home that he never wanted to leave, an idealistic, rustic scene. It's somewhere he wants to be in his dreams, somewhere he can be his best self with the people he loves. Saurfang, though, returns reluctantly to a place that he gladly left behind, a world that he abandoned because it was dying, a world where he committed violence and atrocities that he regrets deeply. Draenor may be his home, but any nostalgia he may feel is secondary to shame and sadness. Don't forget, in Burning Crusade, Saurfang stayed in Orgrimmar. He didn't want to come back to his old homeworld then, so you know there must be something very important that he needs in Outland for him to find himself back here now. And that something turns out to be someone. Because of course this little farm that he's now heading to isn't the home of Saurfang, but of Thrall. Because yes, in case you didn't know, this cinematic is the return of Thrall. Ladies and gentlemen, Green Jesus makes his second coming. We knew he was returning in-game in 8.2, but to have him pop up in one of these cinematics, it's so exciting, partly because, you know, he's an incredibly important lore character who we haven't seen for the best part of 2 years, but also because it's exciting to see anyone pop up in these cinematics. They are so realistic, so beautifully rendered that it's really as close to seeing these characters in real life that we've ever got before. So every time a new character is added to this hyper-realistic roster, it's fascinating in of itself just to see how they're interpreted. It's kind of like when Alex Ross draws your favourite comic book characters, and I swear one day Jaina is going to be in one of these films, and on that day you'll probably never see me again because I'll literally have exploded with happiness, like really actually exploded. And of course, lore-wise, Thrall's return is a big, massive deal, and the cinematic really enjoys this reveal shot of him sharpening his farm tools here. It really luxuriates in allowing us, the viewer, to take in who this is and what he looks like now. Because obviously he looks incredible, everything does, but he's also changed quite substantially from when we saw him last. We've talked about how, like, ludicrously thick and square Thrall is now from his more down-to-earth, physical, non-shaman magic lifestyle. He's grown his hair out. In fact, to go from bald to thick nipple-length braids in 2 years is frankly outstanding work, proving that Thrall is not just the most loved and respected of Orc leaders, but also the most virile too. Maybe those two things are connected. And obviously he appears to have lost most of his clothes too, which, to be honest, if I had suddenly become this stacked, I probably would as well. People talk about Thrall being Metzen, but body-wise, he's clearly done a halinka here, hasn't he? But that most important and iconic of Thrall features is present and correct. His weirdly thick human eyebrows. And here, more than ever, those eyebrows lend his facial expressions a really recognizable and relatable quality, which is exemplified as he sees Saurfang approaching. He's obviously not surprised. You feel like he must have expected this day would come eventually, but he's also clearly not happy about it. And this animation quality is typical throughout the entire cinematic. The nuances in the faces of both Thrall and Saurfang tell so much of this story, which is amazing when you think about it. You'll notice there's actually barely any real dialogue in this whole film because they convey so much visually, and that's incredibly impressive. And as these two legendary orcs approach each other and take equal billing in this shot, which we later learn might actually be the viewpoint of a third as yet unrevealed character, we get a good look at this farmstead that Thrall is living on. It's not new. He hasn't built it himself. He's clearly moved into an old abandoned farm in Nagrand. He really has escaped the pressures of leadership and war and is attempting to live the ultimate simple life on the orc homeworld. It really makes you think of Thanos at the end of Infinity War. He is Thrallnos, seeing out his days in peace and solitude on his farm. Thrallnos, yeah. But there is an important difference. Thanos went to his farm as a reward to himself, to rest after completing his life's work successfully. Thrall is here because he's run away from his failure, because he's hiding from his self-doubt. This isn't a relaxing Thanos-style retirement for Thrall, it's a self-imposed exile. There's another interesting point about his choice of exile location too, which we'll get to in a moment, but now this is where we get to the real meat of this cinematic, the conversation between Saurfang and Thrall.
So, this is home now. Home. Family.
And I love the body language here because it communicates something that is so easy to forget. The way Saurfang strides in so casually and Thrall's stance is so much more defensive and wary, his eyes narrow, his words carefully chosen. Because yeah, Thrall might be the ex-leader of the Horde, but a very apparent dynamic in this scene is that Saurfang is twice Thrall's age. He left this stupid broken world and was killing humans on Azeroth before this chunky shaman was even born. Varroc's own late son is considerably older than Thrall. I think there's a really lovely sense here of Thrall talking to one of the few people in the world who can actually tell him off and put him in his place. And we'll see that's exactly what Saurfang does multiple times throughout this cinematic, because Saurfang takes zero shit. He has zero patience for Thrall's 2-year sulk, and he is landing some proper truth bombs, which he is launching from his sass cannon.
And where are they?
Here has an almost schoolmasterly tone to it. And this is a great moment. It shows how messed up things are at this point. That tiniest of grimaces as Thrall decides not to tell Saurfang exactly where his family is.
Not far.
Despite their years of fighting side by side, of Varroc proving his loyalty and devotion to the Horde over and over again, Thrall doesn't, in that moment, know if he can trust Saurfang with that most precious of information. That's the kind of uncertainty that everyone is living under now. And Saurfang kind of gets that. He understands it. He takes it in his stride, doesn't take it personally. In fact, he goes on to give a speech which I think is as close to orc poetry as we've ever got in WoW.
This world... it looks good. But it's wrong. Broken. Falling apart. Just like the Horde.
And you know, this is powerful enough in itself. I mean, it's a great line. Christy Golden, who wrote this dialogue, is brilliant, I think, at fitting quite a lot of stuff into a very elegant and efficient sentence or phrase, which is why I think she is so perfect for scripting cinematics like these, where dialogue has to be very sparing and to the point. But it's even better when you think of the context. Saurfang is quite gently telling Thrall here that he's hiding in a dream world. He's saying, look, I'm from here. I know this place. I know why we left. It's broken, and that's important because Thrall isn't from Outland, don't forget. He was born on Azeroth. Escaping now to the land of his people is almost like self-delusion in a way, playing at being a proper, authentic Draenor Orc in proper, authentic Nagrand. That's probably why he hasn't fixed up the decrepit, authentic Orc farmhouse that he's living in. There's almost something a bit gap year student about it. It's a lie, and that beautiful, wistful, nostalgic old Nagrand music that plays almost ambiently underneath all of this gives everything an almost dreamlike quality. Because I don't know about you, but that Nagrand music, it's too much. I can't even. Because when we played through these zones, who didn't think to themselves, oh shit, man, this is so amazing and peaceful with all these lush fields and tunes. I could totally live here. But of course we couldn't. Could we? Because we had to go and fight Illidan, and then we had to go and fight Arthas, and then Deathwing, and every other threat that's come along since. Settling in Nagrand was a dream, and it's a dream that Saurfang knows he needs to snap Thrall out of, and we see a genuine moment of dismay and need from the old Orc, when he is so saddened by what is happening to the Horde that he momentarily just can't find the words.
Do you know? Do you know what she's done while you've been hiding?
And you sense the reason he has to stop in the middle of that first sentence there is to try and control himself. It's usually at this point we've seen in conversation that he smashes his hand through a wall, but this is too important. And when he points the word hiding at Thrall, it's tinged more with disappointment than anger. He is calling his old war chief out in the most parental of ways, and Thrall knows it, which is where this cinematic does something that I really wasn't expecting. Something wonderful and mischievous and strangely satisfying. It purposely makes Thrall, Green Jesus, look like a bit of a dick.
I left that life behind. I'm no one's savior. I will not lead the Horde. I didn't ask. But I hoped you would at least fight for it.
Thrall has clearly been rehearsing this speech. You can almost see him there every day as he sharpens his tool at the anvil, brooding, thinking, they'll come and they'll ask me to lead the Horde, but they don't realize that I can't. I'll give them this speech. You can see him repeating what he ends up saying here to himself. When they ask me to be their leader, I'll put my foot down. I'll say I can be no one's savior. I'll refuse. They'll just have to accept that I won't be their leader. And yeah, I'll say it, there might just be the tiniest hint of medicine in there as well, and the idea that the Warcraft fans can't let him go, are always begging him to come back and save the game. But in Thrall's case, it's clearly pride, an assumption that if he were to get asked for help, it would be as a savior, as a leader, and the amusement on Saurfang's face when he says it, the raised eyebrow at that pride of Thrall's, and the glee with which he punctures the little boy's self-assumptions with that
I didn't ask.
is just perfect, isn't it? Saurfang basically telling Thrall to get the F over himself. Something that I'm sure many of us players have wanted to say on more than one occasion. We never asked you to lead, but I'd expect you to at least fight, you bloody emo. And it says something for how brilliant this film is. That is only the second best line in it. By the way, I also really like this little throwaway moment where Thrall clocks Saurfang's son's Horde pendant on Varrock. Another painful reminder of one of the many casualties under Thrall's command, and of the kind of responsibility that he is desperate to avoid having again. Even after this dressing down though, Thrall, amazingly, is still not done with his sulk, and probably feeling a little bit stung at how firmly he just got called out. He turns his back to his old general and makes to go back to sharpening his tools. We see Thrall walking out of that same shot that both orcs walked into at the beginning of this exchange, signifying that this conversation is now over. Or at least it would be, were it not for what happens next, as we realise that this frame isn't just a cool and effective camera angle, although, you know, it is that too. It's actually someone's point of view, because now it's time for the Forsaken to make their entrance. And we go into a full-on action sequence, which is something we haven't had in the previous 2 installments in this series, and it's particularly cool in this case because it features 2 female Forsaken rogues, which is a class which often gets sorely neglected in WoW cinematics, so it's really cool to see them here doing their thing, even if their thing is mostly to get their surprisingly shapely behinds handed to them by 2 Legends of the Horde, There was some brief talk when this cinematic first hit that these 2 might be lightbound undead because of their golden glowing eyes, but as the player of a female Forsaken rogue myself, I can promise you that no, they all have golden glowing eyes, okay? Some people suggested that they might be Forsaken night elves or blood elves, which they aren't either because, you know, they have no big ears sticking out of their hoods. That is quite important though, because the fact that they are standard human Forsaken means that they are not Dark Rangers, as in they are not the elite assassins that Sylvanas has sent after Saurfang multiple times in this storyline. More on that later. But it's still cool to hear those rogue stealth sounds in this context, and to realise that canonically now, apparently, stealth does literally make its user invisible, which is kind of interesting. I love how ready to snap into combat instantly Thrall and Saurfang are. Thrall reacting to a creaking roof beam instinctively by throwing a spadeful of ash and soot into the air to reveal the stealthed second assassin, who, by the way, is attempting genuine PvP talent death from above on him, cheeky rogue. As Red Rogue attacks Saurfang here, she forgets that he's been about since vanilla and his unarmed skill is maxed out. And this shot of Saurfang smashing Red Rogue with a post, which obviously for most of us is going to bring back that iconic moment in the original vanilla Warcraft trailer where the Tauren smashes the Dwarf Hunter's bear. Tauren versus Dwarf in vanilla WoW is so black and white, straight up basic Horde versus Alliance. It doesn't get any more simple than that. Whereas here, in this recreation, it's a legendary Horde general, now traitor, attacking another member of the Horde who's trying to kill him. It's just another highlighting of how complicated and backward everything is now. How far the Horde have strayed from that simple time back in 2004 when all you had to worry about was smashing the Alliance when they got in your way. It's really cool to get this close-up shot of Grey Rogue and her decaying undead face as she realises she may have bitten off more than she can chew here and attempts to escape, but clearly Vanish has been nerfed in 8.2 because Saurfang performs a mid-air invisible neck snap, which might just be the most baller thing that I've ever seen in a WoW cinematic. And again, it's just really satisfying to see a Forsaken rendered in this kind of hyper-realistic detail. Can't wait to see Jaina, that's what I'm saying. And still, in the aftermath of this fight, Thrall is being just a little bit petulant here. Like, I do understand him being naturally concerned that his hiding place has been given away, but in his bluster in this next line, you also sense there's an element of trying to regain the moral high ground over Saurfang after the old orc so mercilessly called out his indulgent, sulky behaviour.
You were followed! I followed them.
And that is the best line in this cinematic. One of Christy Golden's best, because it turns this whole scenario on its head. Far from Saurfang carelessly hunting down his old leader and bringing danger to Thrall's new microbrewery door through his carelessness, in fact, it was Saurfang who intercepted the 2 rogues. It was them that led him to find Thrall, completely by mistake. Of course, this has some pretty serious implications for what exactly Sylvanas is up to as well, which we'll discuss properly in a bit. But this revelation, and the fact that Thrall has been wrong at just about every turn in this cinematic, blinded by his own pride, his own indulgence, and mistrust of those most loyal to him, arrogance really, this is what finally snaps Thrall out of his dream. He just can't keep this lie going to himself now that its untruth has been laid out so bare for him. And when Saurfang says plainly,
You and I, we don't get to hide.
well, that's just the last push he needed. Because Saurfang's actually done something very generous here, in systematically calling out every single one of those excuses that Thrall has been making to himself for his inaction. I just want to live in solitude, in peace. Well, this world that you've chosen is a lie. It's hollow. I can't lead the Horde. No one wants you to. We just want your sexy new muscles. I just want to keep my family safe. They're not safe here. In freeing him of those responsibilities, of the burden of being Thrall in a way, Saurfang has granted him the gift of just being another orc soldier who has a duty to fight for the Horde. So you get this awesome John Wick or God of War moment where Thrall kicks his anvil aside to reveal that he has a badass weapon hidden ready for use. Because that's the thing about lying to yourself, isn't it? You always deep down somewhere know that you're doing it. And it turns out that Thrall hasn't just been out here planting shit wheat, but also forging himself a new weapon to replace the Doomhammer, which, you know, kind of belongs to me now. Sorry, Thrall. It's mine, get away! And to replace his hammer, he's made an axe. So Thrall is basically Thor at this point. He's Thrall. Except, notably, still with no electric lightning powers as of yet. And if this is a Kratos moment, like in God of War, accepting that he has to fight though he doesn't want to, and revealing his old weapon, then he is also the boy here too. Atreus, accepting a harsh but fair lesson from a gruff father figure, a figure who now smiles with immense pride as the drums of war begin to beat in the soundtrack. Because just as a young soldier in the shape of Zakan called Saurfang out on his self-indulgent shit on the dawn of the Battle of Lordaeron, just as he was dragged back from the brink and filled with a new purpose, a new sense of hope by the relative innocence of that young troll, so now Saurfang has returned the favour and done the same thing for another jaded Horde legend, shown Thrall what's truly important, what truly lies at the heart of the Horde. It's not about how hard you fail, it's about how hard you are willing to keep fighting for what's right. Saurfang, he protect, he neck snap, he bring Thrall back. And that, ladies and gentlemen of the internet, is Safe Haven. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about here. Firstly, just because it's the kind of thing I wonder about, you know, we talked for a long time on stream what this axe actually is. People speculated it was the axe of Durotan, which Thrall has wielded before, or even Gorehau, but it certainly doesn't seem to be either of those from the in-game model where we see it a bit clearer. It certainly seems to me that this is a new weapon that Thrall has apparently forged for himself, making him the only person at Blizzard who took my forge your own artifact for BFA idea seriously, and you'll see I bet it works out better for him than Azerite Armor did. It was a good idea, Blizzard, you should have gone with that one. The other, far more important questions, though, involve Sylvanas, as they so often do. Because, you know, Blizzard have kept saying that Sylvanas is absolutely definitely not Garrosh 2.0, and I'm totally willing to believe them because, you know, they should know. But, you know, they keep giving us very explicit parallels between Garrosh and the new war chief, which are just impossible to ignore. Sylvanas supposedly sending 2 assassins to take Thrall out has obvious echoes of Garrosh attempting to have Vol'jin assassinated in Mists of Pandaria. And now she has a proper organised rebellion on her hands in the shape of Saurfang, Thrall, Zakan, Bane, Lorthamar in a little while, and maybe, depending on how you've gone about those RP bits in the war campaign, you. It's all shaping up to be a basic rerun of the Siege of Orgrimmar, really, isn't it? Almost beat for beat. I still think that it's entirely intentional, personally. I feel that they are consciously making the build-up very similar to further contrast a very different payoff and result. But that's pure speculation. I want to talk about these assassins. Lots of people have pointed out that it's unrealistic Sylvanas would send 2 lone grunts to deal with someone as powerful as Thrall. And I actually think that's quite a good point. As I mentioned earlier, past events have shown us that Sylvanas would usually send her Dark Rangers for a job like this. So here's what I think. I don't think that they were there to kill Thrall. I think these 2 rogues were sent by Sylvanas to find Thrall and to just keep tabs on him. Check that he wasn't planning on getting up to any shit that could threaten the Horde leadership. Of course, they had no idea that they were leading Saurfang straight to him either. And when Saurfang, Horde fugitive public enemy A#1, turns up unexpectedly, the 2 spies decide to take this lucky chance that they've just been offered on a plate to kill the famous traitor. This would seem to be evidenced by the fact that they attack Saurfang first. Of course, once they lose the element of surprise, these 2 rogues, elite though they probably are, I mean, they're probably like, you know, CR 2000 at least, you know, never stood a chance against these 2 raid bosses, and they would have known that when they attacked, but they did it anyway, because they couldn't let a chance to kill the traitor Saurfang pass them by. If anything, these two rogues are absolute, total, selfless heroes of the Horde and should get statues in the centre of Orgrimmar. Hashtag Red Rogue, Grey Rogue, never forget. Surely, whatever you think, it's totally within character for Sylvanas to want to keep eyes on any potential threats. I mean, I also personally think it's totally within character to order the assassination of Thrall at this point too, actually, but you know. But whether Sylvanas did want Thrall dead, or was just trying to keep him within sight, she failed, and her Horde has another brand new enemy. It's really not looking good for her or her leadership, and I can't help but think, assuming that Blizzard are right, and that this isn't a Garrosh 2.0 situation happening here, how is it going to be different? What can possibly occur at this point which can get Sylvanas off of the Siege of Orgrimmar trajectory that she's currently on? I've got a feeling it might involve old gods, but I just don't know. So what do you guys think? How do you rate Thrall's return and being schooled by Sassy Saurfang's Sass Cannon of Truth? What were those two Forsaken rogues really there to do? Whose side are you on in the upcoming Horde standoff? And what can possibly stop Sylvanas being Garrosh in BFA? Let us know in the comments below. And I just want to say quickly before we end here, how brilliant I think this series of cinematics is. WoW has never really seen anything like them, and the way that they're using them to explore the B-plot this expansion is bold, it's exciting, it's an absolute joy. I'm certain this is not the last we'll see of them, so you can colour me very, very excited indeed for 8.3, when I get the feeling we might see the Dark Lady herself make a return to the Saurfang series. And thank you for joining us today. If you like this video, don't thank us, thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our work happen. Guys, without you, there would genuinely be a whole lot less Taliesin Evitel, so thank you. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Joanna Griebel. No, my name is Taliesin. From me and Evitel, until the return of the weekly reset this weekend, cheerio.